Okay, welcome to week 11. Tonight's verse is Psalms 119, 7 through 9. The instruction of the Lord is perfect, renewing one's life. The testimony of the Lord is trustworthy, making the inexperienced wise. The precepts of the Lord are right, making the heart glad. The command of the Lord is radiant, making the eyes light up. The fear of the Lord is pure, enduring forever. The ordinances of the Lord are reliable and altogether righteous. Tim Hurd, would you pray for us?
Heavenly Father, we just once again come before your throne, just thanking you for just Imago Dei, just for creating us in, Father, your image. Thank you for the blessings that you've continued just to bestow upon us all. Father, for this group, I pray that as we just continue just to dive into these tough questions and just tough realities, that we can focus on you and know that, Father, you are our absolute truth. Your word is absolute. So, fathers, have us just find a place in you and content in you. Contentment is what we're looking for. We need to be content in you, Father. So, Father, as we go through this night tonight, have us just glorify you in all that we say and do. In your Son, Jesus' name, I pray. Amen.
And Cheryl, we'll turn it over to you.
Okay, we have 6 questions tonight, so we'll get started. I have new helpers here. You can't see them all. Here they are. Okay, number 1, what is Black self-hate, and how have you seen that concept play out in your own life or the lives of others? Kiwana.
Okay, so my definition of Black self-hate is when a Black person hates some aspects of themselves as it relates to their ethnicity. So this can be the kinky hair, the thicker lips, the broader nose, the thick thighs and the hips, you know, some aspect. And that hate is coming from being taught that because you're in the minority, you are inferior, you're not good enough, you're less than. And that the majority culture is what's to be looked upon as beautiful. Yes, I've seen it. I have seen it in name calling amongst other Black people. I mean, it's you know, from being called, well, you know, you just so Black, or, you know, me personally, oh, you just a wannabe, you know, you think you white, this, that, the other. And so basically results in hurt feelings. You do think of yourself as less than, and you definitely don't see yourself as an image bearer.
Wow, that's powerful. Michael, what do you say? You're the one who brought this up last week.
Well, I would just, echo Kiwana's definition of Black self-hate. So I think that's a good summary of it. And I guess that's going to the other part of the question. And she really didn't mention it, but like, how do you, see it play out in our lives? And, I posted a while back some resources as far as the doll experiment. So if anybody hasn't been, understand that, you can go back and research it, see what I'm getting at. But, in reference to that, one of the things that my mother was intentional about with, because I and Bethany, when they were young, that, she intentionally, because of those studies of those, bought them Black dolls. So once again, trying to, reinforce that so you won't be having that Black self-hate, considering yourself beautiful and not be influenced by culture about your self-worth in a negative way.
Okay, Lauren.
Yeah, I think that pretty much sums it up. I have notes. So if I look this way, I have little notes on my computer. I put that Black self-hate comes from internalized racism. When you are, like Kawana was saying, when you are told that, your features, your culture, your, everything that makes you a Black person is not the norm, when you're told that that is wrong, it's verbal abuse. It's generations of verbal abuse and mental abuse. So when someone is telling you that and society is telling you that over a series of generations, it's a hard mindset to get out of. That's why I think representation matters so much, because then you're providing positive representation to counteract the negative stereotypes and things that we're taught. I had a couple examples of kind of how that plays out personally in my life, similar to Kawana. I enjoyed things that were not seen as typically Black. I'm a huge nerd. I love like alternative rock music, and that wasn't something that was seen as what Black people were into. So I was told, you know, I was acting white or talking white. Another thing that can kind of another way that can show is this term called misogynoir, which is misogyny against Black women. And that can come from a lot of the stereotypes of like the angry Black woman, the Jezebel, that sort of thing. So that plays out that way as well. The adultification of Black girls. So that plays into that as well. Another thing that he found was really interesting, and of course, me being in an interracial marriage, I think about, you know, often, is sometimes a perceived motivation behind interracial marriage and dating that can also stem from internalized racism, because people can internalize the stereotypes of the opposite, and therefore they look outside of their race as dating options, which like obviously that's like not everybody, of course, but I just thought that those are examples of how self-hate comes from internalized racism and can kind of play out in everyday life. Does that make any sense?
Yeah. Wow. I feel like you could write a book about that one. That was good. Caitlin, do you have anything you want to add to that?
I can't go after Lauren, so now I'm done.
No, nobody can. I feel like we should just leave her for last.
I'm going to mute myself.
Yeah. Tim, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Not really. I mean, you know, they all hit the point. You know, just the self-hate is, you know, it is passed down. It's you know, or it can be passed down, but we have to just step forward and then tell ourselves that Imago Dei. I mean, if we are reminded of that, for a lot of us, for me personally, I did not know that term until I'd say about 10 years ago. And so know what Imago Dei really meant. And then over the years, as I continue to hear it and see it, it's like, you know, I am created in the image of God. And so for a while, just like Lauren said, you know, because, you know, you're called, well, you were trying to act white, or you're trying to do this, or, you know, you're trying to do that. You don't fit into the stereotypical Black, you know, so therefore you must hate yourself. And that's a total lie that, you know, we buy into. But if we can continue just to show our children the Black dolls and Black, you know, you are beautiful. You are, you know, you are created in the image of God, first and foremost. And therefore, because you're created in the image of God, you're special. Your skin tone, you know, whatever level of skin tone that you have, God created you that way for a specific reason, because He loves you. Just remind Him of that. And so that, you know, and how it plays out, it can have some negative consequences. I've seen people that I've grown up with that have really just turned just their backs to, you know, just being who God has created them to be. And that's not a good thing. And I just pray that they can see the light and see a difference that, you know, being in the light of God can make them.
Okay, the second question is for the females in our midst. I feel like, Michael, you don't have a lot, you know, to offer on this question. So, did people just snap about that? Okay. Explain the significance of hair in the Black community, specifically females, and how can we support Black females positively in this area? Caitlin, I'm going to come to you first.
Thank you. I don't have big words like misogynoir So I appreciate that. Significance of hair in the Black community. Well, I mean, I shared with you guys last week that I prayed for white girl hair when I was younger, and I was just so convinced that the good Lord was going to bless me with it, and he did not. So there's a couple of, I'll keep this short and sweet, but there's a couple of reasons why our hair is so significant. One is that it is unlike, for the most part, it is unlike any other ethnic group's type of hair. Like if you think of Europeans, you think of Hispanic, Asian, of course it's not all the same, but it does kind of have like the hang time, and it's silky and it moves. But Black women, ours is the only one that grows, like, not the only one that grows curly out of our head, but just, it just is. My Black ladies, you know, like it just, I don't know how to describe this magic except Black girl magic. So ways in which to, thank you, Kawana, ways in which to support Black females, oh, I'm sorry, one other thing that is so important is because if you go back in history, I feel like Michael right now. Let me take you back on a little history tour. But Black women, because our hair could do all these cool and funky hairstyles, I don't know like the time period, but they were asked to like wrap their hair, like to wrap it up, because it was, you know, very distracting. And I want to say that it was like, you know, they thought like they would be tempting to the white man or something. So they had to put scarves on. And then what did we do, ladies? We made it into fashion. That's what we did. Okay. But even today, it's, you hear about little girls at school that come home crying because their hair was too big and they can't wear their hair in a certain style. But there's never any other type of group of people, that's a gross generalization, but I'll stick with it, that you're told you can't wear your hair the way in which it grows out of your head. That is the biggest difference. So how can we support Black females? Love us for the different variations that our hair can do, and just accept this Black girl magic for what it is. Amen. Amen.
You got Corey over there laughing. Okay. Kawana, what do you say?
Oh, thank you so much, Caitlin, for that trip down the history lane. I definitely appreciate it. So my thoughts of that, you know, even the Bible tells us that a woman's hair is her crown and glory, right? So we have some biblical backup for that. And I'll just say that Black women have gone through great lengths throughout history to fit in and to be accepted in society as it relates to our hair. I did a little research. Comes out that in 2018, Black hair care, which I already knew it, was a $2 billion, with a B, $2 billion industry. So yeah, we're trying to take care of this. We're trying to work with all this, with our crown. We're trying to work with it. And so $2 billion industry. Like I said, we put in some time and some effort in what the Lord gave us. But it's mostly because to be accepted by society. Even, you know, once again, in history, and I think Michael posted an article, I don't know if it made it to our general group, but, you know, reasons that we put ourselves through this. Number one, slavery, self-hate. All right, my hair's not good enough, so, you know, I have to make it conform. Media, what have we seen in media? What's once again, what's held up as the beauty standard? What does the hair look like? You know, if you think about all the commercials you've seen, it's always been long, silky, flowing, blowing in the wind. That's the woman in every commercial, right? So that's what's deemed beautiful, what's deemed acceptable. Also, jobs. Caitlin already said, you know, some Black girls have been told you can't graduate if you wear your hair like this, or, you know, you get picked on in school if you wear your hair like this. Some same women have been told you can't work here if you wear your hair like that. And you know, and at the end of the day, sometimes it's just manageability. All right, I'm going to straighten this stuff out. I'm going to perm it. I'm going to relax it. I'm going to fall into the cream and crack syndrome of, and that means a relaxer. So I'll give you some history. Cream and crack is also known as a relaxer, perm. It is addictive. My Black girls know. It is addictive. So to straighten what God has given us, I purposely washed my hair today. It has air dried. This is it in its natural state. This is it. All I did was put some oil, coconut oil in it. This is it in its natural state. It looks like here, but if I could take the shrinkage out, it's gonna stop here. So this is just what the Lord gave me. Also, two things came to my mind as we were having this discussion. Two movies that just demonstrate Black hate and Black self-hate about hair and just the barriers that Black women have had to overcome. There's a scene in the movie School Days, directed by Spike Lee. It is rated R, so parents, just saying. It is currently on Netflix, but there's a scene where the dark-skinned Black girls meet up with the light-skinned Black girls, and they're trying to go to the same place, and they clash, and they immediately start spewing insults at each other because of their hair. Oh, your hair is nappy. Your hair is not yours. It just looks that way because you straightened it last night. And they're constantly throwing insults at each other. Another one is the movie, also on Netflix, a little documentary about Madam C.J. Walker, the first Black female millionaire as a result of hair care products, called Self-Made, also rated TV mature. So once again, parents be warned. But it just kind of gives a glimpse into what Black women went through and still go through for one of those reasons. So sum it up, as Caitlin said, embrace us as we are. You know, it's different. We know it. We're trying to love it. We're learning to love it. I praise God right now for that I have daughters right now, because this is now the time that Black hair is being accepted for what it is. And no one's being made to press it out and be accepted by society.
So Kiwana, when somebody says nappy, like they say your hair is nappy, what does that mean?
Okay, so when you have some nappy hair, so once again, we have all we have heard it as a Black race. It's not gender neutral. You can be male, you can be female, and it could be nappy. All right, so basically, the new term would be kinky or extremely coiled. Okay, so that's a little more endowed, I think, with self-confidence. The hair is just tightly wound. We cannot control our curl. That's all it is. I have a very loose curl. All right, that's my granddaddy's fault. He was white. I have a very loose curl. If somebody else may have, like you can look at Keziah right now, her curl is tighter than mine. But rest assured, if we take that hair strand and we just pull it out, it's coming down here. So once again, nappy is going to be derogatory to explain the tightness of a curl.
Very helpful information. And I think we all can agree that Keziah's hair looks amazing. Amazing. Tim, I see you identifying with the nappy comment, but I don't know why, because you have no hair.
Oh, girl, you haven't seen me back in the day. I had it all. I had the fro. I mean, I was just, it was flowing.
We're gonna need you to find a picture and show it on your screen in just a minute.
I don't have
Lauren.
one.
Okay, Lauren, we're off to you.
I was so excited about this question because I am constantly watching videos about natural hair care. I've learned so much about my own hair. Anyways, I'm gonna breathe because I start to talk a little fast when I get excited. Just like what Caitlin said, Black hair is magical. A lot of people don't really understand it. I've seen a lot of people, you know, especially when it comes to cultural appropriation of certain Black hairstyles, people would say, well, it's just hair. Why does it matter? The point is, it's not just hair. It's never historically been just hair. You can take it all the way back to the tribes in Africa. Hairstyles, braiding styles, the intricate woven hairstyles were indicative of which tribe you belong to, your status in that tribe, your life stage, if you're married, unmarried, your economic status. So it's never just been just hair, which is why when slaves were brought to the Americas, a lot of the times they took those tools away, had them shave their head, that sort of thing, because so much of the culture was embedded in the hair of these African tribes. That was one way to strip that away from Africans who were brought to this country as slaves. And then of course you get the dehumanizing of hair, referring to it as wool, as nappy, as unmanageable, difficult, that sort of thing. So that further, you know, maybe the internalized racism that we spoke about a second ago made Black people feel even worse about their hair. Like what Kawana was saying, she has looser curls. I am 4B, 4C over here. My hair is in my 2-strand twist for moisture. So a lot of times women with kinkier, coily hair, they were the ones who were told that their hair was unmanageable and nappy and wool-like. So then that plays into the whole colorism aspect of like lighter skinned women with looser curls were seen as more favorable than maybe darker skinned women with tighter coils, which is like crazy because both are beautiful and the spectrum in between. One movie I would probably recommend is a documentary by Chris Rock. I don't know what the rating is for that, but it's Chris Rock, so use your discernment. But it's called Good Hair. He kind of goes through, it was in the early 2000s, he kind of goes through the like, the onset of perms and like, you know, the hair care industry and weaves and wigs and that sort of thing. It's hilarious, but like I said, it's Chris Rock, so just, and I think that was very interesting because once again, when we talk about, you know, self-hate and internalized racism, we think about the Eurocentric, standards that were imposed on Black women to have straighter hair, to have kind of that looser texture, and that became the, you know, what perm is. And like, and in the documentary, you'll see they perm like little girls' hair, like they have perm for kids. Like I got a perm when I was very young, went straight from a perm to locks to loose natural. So it's definitely changed now. With the onset of social media and YouTube, a lot of people are out here embracing their curls. They renamed the hair care aisle to maybe, I think it's like what, texture hair now instead of ethnic hair as it used to be. So there's a lot more acceptance of Black hair, but there's a lot of work to be done as well. We still have, like Kawana saying, workplace discrimination. I think New York and California, and correct me if I'm wrong, are the only 2 states that have laws in place that are, you know, against workplace discrimination based on hair. You see many times children being sent home, mostly Black girls, but some Black boys as well being sent home because of hair. I remember one time there was a kid who was getting ready to do his wrestling match and was told that he needed to cut his locks. And as a person who had locks for 10 years that were down my back, that was really hurtful because the locks are seen as unkept and unclean, which in my experience, that was not, I took care of my locks. So to see, and they had to cut his hair in front of everybody. And it's just things like that. So we're getting closer to kind of acceptance. But it's still a very long way to go. And I think just like everyone else was saying, just embracing natural hair. It is what it is. It grows out of our head this way. It's what we got. And just understanding the cultural relevance and the practical relevance of a lot of the hairstyles that we do, a lot of the braiding that we do. So just appreciate it, but please don't touch it without permission. Thank you.
Hey, well, you actually touch on that because my daughter says the same thing. And Keziah, you may have experience with this as well.
Touching hair?
Yes, without permission.
Oh yeah, don't do it. I just, just Solange has a song, Don't Touch My Hair. Just don't. I think it's coming from the place of like, ooh, this is so new and so cool. Can I touch it? And that you just stick your hands in people's hair. But it's just, I think common sense would be, don't invade people's personal space. And I think once we start to normalize, even more normalize Black women's hair and their hairstyles, it would become less of a unicorn, if that makes sense. But please just don't. If it's your friend, I've had friends, you know, if I do my hair a certain way, they're just like, oh, I love your hair. Do you mind if I touch it? And sometimes I'm like, sure. And sometimes I'm like, no, I spent a really long time on this hairstyle. Please don't touch it. But definitely strangers, just don't do it. Don't do it.
Keziah, have you had that experience?
Yes. I remember one time my mom had straightened my hair and just put it like kind of folded under itself, and my friends immediately all swarmed around me like, oh, can I touch it? And they just started like poking the top of my head, and I honestly didn't know what to do at that moment.
This can't be any different than women that have been pregnant. You don't want people just coming up and touching your pregnant belly. Think of it like that. It's no different.
I know the last time we got our daughter's hair done, she chose a hairstyle that took a long time, like 7.5 hours, I believe. And of course that cost quite a bit of money. And I thought, you better not touch her hair. It was just it took a long time, and that was hard. Okay.
See, Cheryl, it takes a long time for me to do mine.
I figured that.
Wash day is called wash day for a reason.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I think my kids are just watching Corey's responses to every question. Okay. Number 3, and this is for anybody, because we want to hear from everybody in regard to this, especially nowadays. How do you respond when someone makes a racist remark? A racist remark. Corey, I'm going to ask you first.
Are you talking about pre-saved or like?
No, let's talk about after we met Jesus. What do we say?
So, you know, I'm a firecracker. So I can't tell you how I would respond, honestly. I think it just depends on the circumstances. I would want to try to, handle it in a manner that is exemplary, try to set an example, or, it just depends on what was said. Because you can let some things go. You can say, maybe he didn't mean it that way, or she didn't mean it that way. Maybe it was just out of ignorance, or maybe it was just, stark hate. And even that can be excused. I think it just depends on the circumstances and what would I do. Like I said, I would just try to, handle it in a way that doesn't cause, some kind of verbal conflict or physical conflict. That's the last thing I would want to do. I think if it persists, then at that point in time, I would call for someone to hold me back, because at that point in time, the persistence of it would offend me greatly. And I'd feel like I needed to defend myself. And, growing up, I haven't always been trained in a way to not use my fists, right? So I would think at that point in time, it would probably be beyond, an exemplary reaction, because, now in my older age, I'm a little bit better at, trying to talk through things and letting other people handle stuff. But in my younger days, that wouldn't go over so well.
Gotcha. Michael, what about you?
Well, just to follow up on what Corey said, well, you know, basically, if you want to boil it down, it's two ways you can always approach it. So you're going to either handle it in the spirit, that you're walking in the spirit, or you're going to handle it walking in the flesh, right? I mean, I really don't see too many more options. And as, you know, in walking in the spirit, you want to address it in an appropriate manner, whether it's taking that person to the side. Are they even aware of what they say it is? Racist, ignorant, prejudiced, bigoted, you know, whatever the case may, whatever word you want to use. Or are you going to walk in the flesh as a Christian? Give an example. You at Thanksgiving dinner, Uncle Johnny saying something he always says. You scared to say something to Uncle Johnny. Oh, Uncle Johnny just like that. We just going to look past that. So once again, find yourself in these situations. Are you walking in the spirit? Are you walking in the flesh? And what does that mean as far as how you approach that with that person? Are you ignoring it? But yet we say, well, we all created in the image of God, and we sing that. But when you have opportunities to address it, you don't. So what do you truly believe? Once again, what you believe and how you act it out, there should be correspondence with that. So, I mean, that's what I would say to it.
Okay. Waldens, how about you guys?
I think like people have said so far, it is definitely a case by case. I mean, that's how we handle most things in life, is sort of judging the situation, the consequences, the person, their attitude. I know we've had an instance traveling in other cities where something was said to us, but kind of deemed it to be a very offhand comment by someone who may not even have been in a good state of mind. And so that wasn't a place to engage, was the judgment. You know, if it's someone who's being verbally or physically racist, yeah, I'm kind of with Corey there. I want to say I'd be able to turn the other cheek, but I don't know, you know, I don't know that I could. I think the middle ground is kind of where Michael was coming at, that maybe it's the family member who says something, or the person that you know, and like Corey said, you can kind of explain it away. Those are a lot harder. I think hopefully, like we've been talking about the past couple of weeks, is a very non-confrontational way is maybe to ask for their clarification. If someone says something as a joke, having them explain a really poor racist or sexist joke usually takes a lot of whatever funniness they intended out of it. Any joke you have to explain is not a good joke. But yeah, I mean, I want to be valuing the people that are oppressed more than I value making the oppressor uncomfortable. I don't know that I'll always live up to that, but that is the hope.
Okay, that's really good, Ross. Kinsley's, what about you guys? Go ahead.
I think I would start with a confession, which is just that I don't think I've ever handled it well. I think my tendency has been to silently stew and judge, but not directly address. And because I'm a white guy, I get to get away with that and it not affect me very much. So I'll start there by saying that's just real and a confession. And I recognize this is an area I have a lot of room to grow in. Lately, the opportunities I've found myself presented with have been more, I don't even know the right terms to use, but not displays of overt racism from people, you know, so but more just in this conversation of maybe denial of racism or a downplay of how serious the issues might be, or attacking BLM versus the phrase Black Lives Matter, or anyway, y'all get the idea. And so it's been interesting to be able to have conversations when there are personal relationships available, you know, to offer maybe just a different perspective that they haven't heard before, or maybe that they've been able to ignore. But in some of it is, I'm hesitating how to say this, is like trying to make it real for them and saying, hey, it's real for my son. Like, I never experienced it before until we had my son and our son. And it got real, like real. And we've seen it much more up close and personal. And so there's been opportunities to kind of share some of that story, wanting to be respectful of our sons, that it's his story too, but being able to share some of that and help highlight what the issue is. I think, you know, if it's a stranger, if it's more overt, that probably deserves more direct confrontation and can be more difficult if there's not relationship of some sort. But most of the opportunities I've been faced with lately have been relational, so it's handling it relationally. And because I can recognize again that how much room to grow I have, I feel like just maintaining that perspective in that humility and coming forward with that is also helpful.
It does seem too that it's a lot easier to address when it's in person as opposed to something online. I think online you get a lot of relational proximity, right? I have a Black friend, I have a Black child, call so-and-so and so-and-so. They know I don't have a Black bone, you know, a racist bone in my body. I have lots of Black friends. And so you get that kind of defense. But in person, it's just, you know, what Ross was saying, you do have that relationship where then you can speak to the person and, like Chris was saying, say this is real, and using those examples. Does anybody else have a comment on that one? Tim, did you?
I like how Michael put it, you know, about, you know, in the flesh or in the spirit. And I was just thinking about, you know, if I'm in the spirit, then, you know, I'm going to lay hands on them and I'm going to flip the table like Christ did. But I mean, but for real, I mean, it's a situation that you're in. It's the environment, because if you're one-on-one, then, you know, you can diffuse it a little bit better and then kind of maybe talking to it. But then if you're around more like a crowd of it, it could intensify very easily to where, you will want to lay hands on them, but it could be the environment of where you are and in order of how you want to handle it. Because there's been times that, like Corey said, in our youth, we had to handle things in a different manner than before we knew Christ. So, and it's unfortunate that we have to, that we even have to even state that. But that's the truth of the matter. And then that word, anything derogatory towards you, you want to defend, you want to defend yourself because it's an attack. And it's like, you can do things, but once you attack me, then I'm going to have to, I'm going to have to step forward and then show you that I'm not going to take this. And Chris, you're right. Sometimes it's easier, well, not easier, but, if it's a stranger, you can kind of come at them a little bit more. But if it's family, it's a little more, you want to go off on them, but you kind of have to hold yourself back to say, if I do this on Thanksgiving, I'm not going to see them on Christmas. So, but and my wife was like, oh, well, and so, for us, it's almost getting to that point. It's almost getting to that point because we're just like, but that's another story.
I want to add this. it has gotten to that point many years ago for some, but I've had to give myself permission to walk away from relationships that aren't healthy. We're very supportive of verbal and emotional abuse when it comes to like certain things. If a husband's abusing a wife in a certain way, or if there's a parent verbally or abusing somebody, a child in their home. But when people have such lack of care and concern for my family or for my children or for my husband or for what we stand for, and they continually show that even after I have a conversation with them or continued conversations with them, and they continually show me that my worth does not hold water, or they have no concern for what they're spewing out or what they're saying, and how that can be mentally abusive and verbally abusive to that other person, then I've learned to give myself permission that it's okay to step out of that. Because before I wouldn't give myself permission for that for a long, long time. And I didn't realize how that took its toll on me as being a wife, as being a mother, as being healthy for myself. And so I think how to handle it also depends on how they're responding to it continually. So especially another Christian that's supposed to be my brother or my sister in Christ, like if they have such lack of care or concern in it, you know, there's boundaries I have to put on that. So.
Oh, that's really good. Really good. Okay, we're going to try to get to, we've got 3 more questions, but I think we're probably only going to get to this one, so we'll see. Okay, if you could go back in time to Sunday, March 7th, 1965, or Monday, November 14th, 1960, would you have been standing with or against John Lewis and Ruby Bridges? John Lewis and Selma and Ruby Bridges in the school system. Do you have 100% conviction and humility about your answer? Okay, I'm gonna mix it up a little bit. Noelle, how about you?
So this is going to shine a big fat light on what I have been like learning and realizing just how deep white privilege has run in my life, that like I didn't know who John Lewis was until really recently. And like I was reading about him and I was like, oh my gosh, like I grew up in Georgia and been in Alabama. I mean, my entire life in Georgia and Alabama, minus 2 years. And yeah, and I was like that. So just for starters, that's where I'm coming from and why I love to just listen and let the Lord kind of show me things. But like knowing a little bit more even about Ruby Bridges, like I would have been like cheering her on. I mean, I went to a school that like there was a handful of Black people and the rest of everybody was white growing up. And I was always really excited when the school year would start and I saw that there were maybe a couple more Black people that came. I was like, good, this is awesome. But did I do anything to jump into that and to try to make a difference or put myself in different situations where I was a minority? No. So anyway, it's kind of not consistent all the way through. But yeah, I mean, I think I've been with her all the way. And then reading what I know about John Lewis, I mean, because he was involved in so much. And I think, yeah, for me, it's always been, okay, so a couple things are true, right? I'm a rule follower, but I also can see things from a multitude of sides. And so I think I would have been one of the ones who would probably, if I'm honest, have been afraid to be up there with him, but would have been in the background going, yes, please do something. Let me cheer you on, go for it. But realistically, honestly, would probably have been almost too afraid to go and do it myself.
So there's my really, really gut level, honest, it hurts to say it out loud answer.
That's what we need to hear, though. Davises, what about you guys?
Well, I'm not sure the author's intent on this question, so I'm going to answer it in two different ways. One, if I knew, knowing what I know now, absolutely, 100% conviction with God's grace. I mean, yes. I mean, you can't speak the words of Imago Dei and then not stand with John Lewis and Ruby Bridges. For me, like, I just can't. Knowing what I know now, absolutely, which spurs me to say, then how can I be standing with the modern day Ruby Bridges and John Lewis's and this whole conversation? If I look back saying, if I could put myself back during that time period, I think I would have probably been more like Noelle, because I think that I would have been so duly influenced by what the church was teaching my parents and what my parents were teaching me. And the church was not teaching Imago Dei, stand with Ruby Bridges. They weren't teaching walk the bridge with John Lewis. So even in my young childhood, and my parents became believers like when I was young. So we kind of grew up in the faith together. And even from the time the early churches that they went through their growing up years, you know, they changed from the church saying blacks and whites should not marry because the Bible preaches that you should not be unequally yoked. That's what was taught to them in their early Christian faith. And so they then passed that down to me. And so throughout all of our growing up together, of course, they were like, well, that's not what scripture teaches at all. But I'm afraid that that's what I would have felt in 1960 church world. And again, that comes back to why I said confidently to begin with, I cannot do that in 2020. I cannot be a part of that church. I don't believe that that's the biblical church. We can't not stand with them.
Cheryl, I think you gave two options. I think Noelle created her own as a third option, and I think Becca joined her in that. I do think there probably is another group of people that were quietly cheering on, but I also think there's probably a fourth option, and it's just the indifferent crowd. It's just the, not my fight, not my problem, not my issue, and I'm going about my life, and we got our own stuff going on. So I think you probably would find yourself in one of those four categories. Yes, I'm standing with them. I'm kind of quiet, but I'm mentally or emotionally standing with them. I'm standing against them, or I'm just somewhat indifferent. For me to answer that question, Cheryl, probably I have to put myself in my family lineage. Obviously, it's a hard question to ask of what would you do different? Well, today we have a different perspective. What would we all do different pre-COVID-19? I think we would all say, oh, I would have done that differently. And I think there are some realities that are much bigger than COVID-19, like what we're talking about. But as we think back to it, and I think about my family lineage, my grandmother, who was one of the most godly people I know, very committed believer, grew up in Oklahoma City, and majority of her life, adult life, at least in Memphis, Tennessee. Loved the Lord, involved in church all the time. I had this conversation with her one day, and she just said to me, that's just how it was. Like, everybody just kept themselves separately and did their own thing. She's not going to be out protesting in the streets against Ruby or John Lewis, but at the same time, she probably mentally was like, I don't understand why this is a big deal. Why can't we just all get along? Why can't we just all do our own thing and stay in our own worlds? And I don't know. So if I put myself in my family lineage and put myself in her shoes, might I be the same as her? Still loving the Lord, still committed to her family and doing everything in her church. but just simply saying, well, not that big of a deal. Let's just live our life. Would I like to in 2020 say I wanted to be that? Well, sure. I'd like to say I want to be that, but I don't know that I can sit here today and tell you or anybody else that I would be the person who would be any different than she was, or any different than my mom, who's now in her upper 70s, who just simply said, this is how we grew up, and it was just normal in Memphis, Tennessee.
I thought about this a lot too, and just thought mine is very different for Ruby and John Lewis. If it was Ruby, I would say yes, because she's a child, and I would fight for her because I love kids, and I just think that, you know, having education together is, I mean, that's just humane. It's not anything we need to like tout that it would be this great thing. That's like basic. I would fight for her. John Lewis, no, I wouldn't have. And it's a shame. But, you know, the way we were raised, and the truth is I wouldn't have, because Black males, when they turn about 14 or 15, became dangerous. That's the way I was raised. And I wouldn't have. I wouldn't have stood with him. I would have stood absolutely against him. And it's sad, but that's true. Today, that obviously wouldn't be the case. But the way we were raised is, you know, once you kind of got to high school, well, our high school started in 7th grade, but once you got to 9th grade, that was it. Black males were considered dangerous, and you didn't hang out with them. And that's the truth. David?
I almost like feel like Caitlin now following Michael and Lauren. How do I follow Noelle, Becca, and Roger and you in that? Other than to say the same as Ruby as a kid, would have been adamant about that and heartbroken. Depends on the age I would have been too, right? If I was a kid, I would have been heartbroken that another child was being treated that way. As an adult, same thing. Unfortunately, before this group, it's what we've learned in the last 12 weeks is prior to this, almost similar to Chris's confession earlier, I allowed media and conservative news outlets or news resources to form my opinion versus being educated on my own about true history. So someone like John Lewis, I would have viewed as a troublemaker and an interrupter to the system. I wouldn't have been standing with him. Probably wouldn't have been vocally opposed to what he was doing. I would fall in that category of what Roger said of, I would have been indifferent and it's not my fight. My voice isn't needed in this. It's not my struggle. Obviously, in the last 12 weeks, one thing we've learned culturally is showing up as a big ministry gift to our brothers and sisters in faith. And it's not enough to agree in the background. Our voices have to be heard, which ties into our next question, right? But yeah, for Ruby, it would have been all for her participation in the school. For John Lewis, I would have viewed him as a troublemaker and would have sat on the sidelines and done nothing and let what happened, unfortunately.
Okay, Kinsley's?
I feel like I've thought about this question all my life since I learned about the civil rights movement. It's been a question that has plagued me a little bit. So in trying to answer it, it's a little bit like, you know, we've all been trying to think, well, how do we put ourselves back there? We wouldn't know what we know now. So I start there. But if I was still the same person, like the way God designed Chris Kinsley to be, but in that environment, well, I think if I was the age of John Lewis when he stood on the bridge, I wouldn't have been standing there. Because as a young man, I was too dogmatic, too steeped in my traditional religious upbringing, and too scared to be wrong, that I wouldn't have been there. If I were now, I think the way I think about it is I probably wouldn't have been there initially, but once the call went out and specifically asking for the call went out for more ministers to come and specifically for white ministers to come, I do think I would have answered that call. I'll put myself at 90%.
Okay, Madison, did you want to speak to this one?
Sure. Can you hear me fine? I think it's easy to say that we would have been there and supportive. You're giving a lot of feedback. For me, because I'm college age and I'm at that age where like I don't agree with everything that my parents believe, I think it would have been easier for me to stand and support. Maybe not that mom and dad, that y'all would have necessarily been against it, but like I think it would have been easier for me to stand and support because I don't necessarily follow everything that the family believes at this stage in my life specifically, because I'm still at a stage where it's like still figuring out everything that I believe. But a fundamental belief that's really important to me that I talk to my friends a lot about is that people are people, and because we're all people in that we're all equal because we're all created by God. And so there's no life that is better than another life. And I think if I had been alive in another time, I still would have believed that equally. I can't say that with like 100% confirmation, but I think I still would have come to the same conclusion that I think that all people are equal and everybody deserves the same rights as everybody else, regardless of anything they've done in their life, regardless of skin color, regardless of disability, regardless of anything. And so I think that I would have stood with them, probably like Mr. Chris said, probably like 90%.
Okay. Do I have anybody else who wants to speak to this? Who wants to answer this one? I'm looking.
Well, I mean, I'll just say a little bit on it. Well, I just appreciate everybody's, answers, and it's it's just a great humbling question that, requires a lot of introspection and, even for a person of color, because, if you think about it, standing with John Lewis, you have some people of color, of course, like it's been said already, that they were, of course, for the cause, wanted civil rights, but they're not willing to be with John Lewis at the front for him to get your head bashed in, right? I mean, that takes a whole nother level of commitment, as the great theologian Mike Tyson has once said, right? Everybody has, a plan until you get hit, right? Then your plan changes quickly then, right? So it just, what are you willing to pay for something you believe in? You look at Ruby's father, him fired from a job. Her grandparents were kicked off their sharecropping land. I mean, so you have ripple effects throughout your whole family. Ruby's father, it's like, he thought it was a good thing, but he didn't want to send his daughter there knowing what's going to be said to her. So he had to restrain himself back because if he went with her, no telling what he would do. So it's on so many levels that you know what's right, but you ask yourself, kind of like goes back to the gospel, you have to count the cost. And one way I always think about it, like, in another country, where we have brothers and sisters in Christ, when they become a believer, we've heard the stories in church before. We've heard the story from David Platt before. Okay, the first thing you got to do, which family members have the least amount of a chance to probably try to kill you? I mean, so that's real. So when you confess Christ there, you're serious. There's not no fair weather Christian. So our level of commitment for something that you truly believe in, that's when it's really tested. Is it real, or is it just you just going through the motions of what you believe in? So that's the only thing I would add to that's, the parallel of our brothers and sisters in third world countries who, when they confess Christ, man, that's it. Their lifestyle is totally different. They're identified as something else. And when they sing the song, "All I Have Is Christ," it's on a different level than when we sing. It's on a whole nother level.
You're so right. And that's such a good reminder that there were ripple effects of people losing their jobs and losing their family. And there was a lot that went into that. You're right, Michael. Okay, David, I'm going to throw that to you because we're out of time.